The dust kicked up around Katelyn James's boots as she stumbled backward from her aunt's pointed finger, the accusation hanging in the air between them like gun smoke that refused to clear. "You brought him to ruin, girl, with your foolish notions and your big dreams," Aunt Margaret spat, her weathered face twisted with grief and rage in equal measure. "If you hadn't convinced him to invest in that mining scheme, we would still have our ranch, our home, everything." Katelyn felt the words like physical blows, each one striking deeper than the last. Camp Verde, Arizona in the summer of 1882, was unforgiving enough without bearing the weight of another person's poor choices. But her aunt seemed determined to place the entire burden of Uncle Thomas's gambling debts and failed investments squarely on her shoulders. The truth was far more complicated, but grief had a way of simplifying things, of finding someone to blame when the real culprit was 6 feet under. "Aunt Margaret, please," Katelyn tried, but her voice cracked. "Uncle Thomas made his own choices. I only mentioned what I had heard in town about the silver prospects. He was the one who invested our savings without telling you." "Do not speak ill of the dead," her aunt hissed, and the small crowd that had gathered in the general store's doorway shifted uncomfortably. "You filled his head with dreams of striking it rich. You are just like your mother, always reaching for more than what the good Lord intended. Now get out of my sight. I never want to see you again." The finality in those words sent Katelyn reeling. She had lost her parents to cholera 3 years ago, and Uncle Thomas and Aunt Margaret had taken her in despite their modest means. Now her uncle was dead from a heart condition the doctor said was aggravated by stress and worry, and the bank was foreclosing on the ranch. Her aunt needed someone to blame, and Katelyn was the easiest target. She gathered what little dignity she had left and walked out of the store, her vision blurring with unshed tears. The harsh Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as she made her way down the main street, past the saloon where piano music tinkled out into the afternoon heat, past the blacksmith's forge where the clang of hammer on anvil marked time like a heartbeat. She had nowhere to go, no family left who would take her in, and only a few dollars to her name. Katelyn found herself at the edge of town, near the livery stable where the scent of hay and horses offered a strange comfort. She sank onto a wooden bench outside, finally allowing the tears to fall. The injustice of it all burned in her chest. Yes, she had mentioned the mining opportunity, but Uncle Thomas had been the one who secretly mortgaged the ranch, who had gambled away their reserves at the card tables trying to make back his losses, who had made deal after bad deal with increasingly dangerous men. How was any of that her fault? "That is a mighty heavy burden you are carrying there, miss." The voice startled her, and she looked up to see a man leading a magnificent bay stallion toward the stable. He was tall, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his worn blue shirt. His eyes were kind despite the hardness that the frontier carved into every face eventually. He could not have been much older than her own 22 years, perhaps 25 or 26 at most. "I am fine," Katelyn said automatically, wiping at her cheeks. "Begging your pardon, but you do not look fine." He tied his horse to the post and approached slowly, as if she were a skittish colt that might bolt at any moment. "Name is Beckett Raines. I have been working at the Miller Ranch about 10 miles north of here." Could not help but overhear some of what happened at the store. Katelyn felt fresh shame wash over her. "So you know that my aunt thinks I am responsible for destroying her life." "I know that your aunt is grieving and looking for someone to blame," Beckett said, settling onto the bench beside her but maintaining a respectful distance. "I also know that a grown man's decisions are his own, not those of his niece who was just making conversation." The simple statement, delivered with such certainty, broke something loose in Katelyn's chest. "You do not understand. I did encourage him. I told him it sounded like a good opportunity." "And did you tell him to mortgage his ranch without telling his wife? Did you tell him to gamble at the tables? Did you force him into any of his choices?" Beckett's voice was gentle but firm. "No, but then his decisions are not yours." Beckett met her eyes, and she saw no judgment there, only understanding. "I lost my own father to bad decisions, miss. He drank himself to death trying to drown his regrets. My mother tried to blame herself, said she should have been a better wife, should have made him happier. But the truth was, he made his choices every day. She did not pour that whiskey down his throat." Katelyn found herself studying this stranger who spoke with such conviction. There was a steadiness to him, a groundedness that felt like solid earth after weeks of quicksand. "I am Katelyn James," she said quietly, "and I have nowhere to go now." Beckett was quiet for a moment, considering. "The Miller Ranch is always looking for help. Mrs. Miller runs a boarding house for the ranch hands and could use someone to help with cooking and cleaning. It is honest work and comes with room and board. I could put in a word for you if you like." Hope flickered in Katelyn's chest, fragile as a candle flame in the wind. "You would do that for a stranger?" "Everyone is a stranger until they are not," Beckett said with a slight smile. "Besides, I have a feeling you are tougher than you look. Anyone who can stand up to Margaret Thornton's wrath and still be sitting here is not someone who gives up easy." "I am not sure I was standing up to anything. Mostly I was just standing there being accused. You did not run. You did not hide. That counts for something." Beckett stood and offered his hand. "What do you say, Miss James? Ready to start fresh?" Katelyn looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong from years of ranch work. She thought about her aunt's words, about the weight of blame she had been carrying, about this cowboy who seemed to see through to a truth she had been too close to recognize. She placed her hand in his and let him help her to her feet. "I suppose I do not have much choice," she said, then corrected herself. "No, that is not right. I am choosing this. I am choosing to start over." "That is the spirit." Beckett's smile widened, transforming his serious face into something warm and approachable. "I need to return this horse to the stable, and then we can head out. The ride is not too long, and we should make it before supper if we leave soon." As Beckett led his horse into the stable, Katelyn took a deep breath of the dry Arizona air. The Verde River Valley spread out before her, rimmed by red rock formations that glowed like embers in the late afternoon sun. Camp Verde had been home for 3 years, but perhaps it was time to find a new place to belong. Perhaps it was time to stop carrying guilt that was never hers to bear. Beckett emerged from the stable with a gentle mare already saddled. "This is Rosie. She is the most even-tempered horse in the stable, and I figured you might not have your own mount." "I do not," Katelyn admitted. "We had to sell the horses when the debts started piling up." "Well, Rosie will treat you right." Beckett helped her mount, his hands careful and respectful, and then swung up onto his own stallion with easy grace. "We will take it slow. It is a nice evening for a ride." They set out north, following the wagon road that wound through the valley. The landscape was stark but beautiful, all red earth and scattered juniper trees, with the distant peaks of Mingus Mountain rising against the endless sky. Katelyn had always loved this land despite its harshness, loved the way it demanded respect and gave beauty in return. "Have you worked at the Miller Ranch long?" she asked as they rode. "About 2 years now. Good people, the Millers. Fair employers, and they treat their hands well. Mrs. Miller lost her own daughter to fever a few years back, so she has a soft spot for young women in need of a chance." Beckett glanced over at her. "I am not saying she will pity you. She will expect hard work, but she will be fair." "I am not afraid of hard work," Katelyn said firmly. "I have been cooking and cleaning since I was old enough to reach the stove. My mother taught me everything she knew before she passed. I am sorry for your loss. Losing parents young is a hard road." It was. Uncle Thomas and Aunt Margaret took me in when they could barely afford another mouth to feed. I tried to help however I could, but now. Her voice trailed off. "Now you are starting fresh," Beckett finished. "Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes life forces us onto new paths whether we are ready or not." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the steady clip-clop of hooves and the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. Katelyn found herself sneaking glances at her companion, noting the confident way he sat his horse, the alertness in his eyes as he scanned their surroundings. There was something about him that made her feel safe, even though they had only just met. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Sure. Why did you help me? You could have just ridden past, minded your own business." Beckett was quiet for a long moment. "I suppose because I have been where you are in a way. When my father died, there were plenty of folks ready to judge my mother to say she had driven him to drink. It was not true, but that did not stop the talk. We had to leave our town and start over somewhere new. A ranch hand named Carlos took a chance on us, got my mother work as a cook and me a job mucking stables. That kindness saved our lives. I figure I owe it to the world to pass it forward when I can. Where is your mother now?" She remarried a few years back, a good man who treats her like a queen. They have a small farm in New Mexico territory. I visit when I can." The fondness in his voice was unmistakable. "She always told me that the measure of a person is not what they have or what they have lost, but how they treat others when they have nothing to gain from it." Katelyn felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the Arizona heat. "She sounds like a wise woman." "She is that." The Miller Ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was a sprawling operation with a large main house, several barns, corrals full of horses and cattle, and a long bunkhouse for the ranch hands. A woman stood on the porch of the main house, shielding her eyes against the sun as she watched them approach. "That is Mrs. Miller," Beckett said. "Let me do the talking first." They dismounted in front of the house, and Mrs. Miller came down the steps. She was a handsome woman in her late 40s, with threads of gray in her dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Beckett, you are back earlier than expected, and you have brought a guest. Mrs. Miller, this is Miss Katelyn James. She is new to the area and looking for honest work. I thought you might have a place for her, if you are still needing help with the boarding house." Mrs. Miller studied Katelyn with the same thoroughness she probably used to judge livestock. Katelyn forced herself to stand straight, to meet that assessing gaze without flinching. She might have nothing to her name, but she still had her pride and her willingness to work. "Can you cook?" Mrs. Miller asked bluntly. "Yes, madam. My mother was an excellent cook, and I learned from her. I can make anything from biscuits to beef stew, and I am good with stretching provisions." "Can you handle difficult men who think the world owes them something?" "I just survived my aunt telling me I destroyed her life, madam. I think I can handle cowboys with complaints about their supper." A smile tugged at the corner of Mrs. Miller's mouth. "I suppose you can at that. Beckett does not usually bring strays home, so you must have made an impression. He is a good judge of character." She paused, then nodded. "All right, Miss James. You have got a 2-week trial. You will help me with cooking 3 meals a day for 12 ranch hands, plus cleaning the bunkhouse and doing laundry. In return, you get your own room in the house, 3 meals a day and $10 a month if you work out." "Deal, deal," Katelyn said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller. You will not regret this." "We will see about that. Come on, I will show you your room and then you can help me get supper on. The men come in hungry as bears and they are not shy about letting you know if the food is not up to standard. Mrs. Miller started toward the house, then paused. Beckett, thank you for thinking of us. My pleasure, madam. As Katelyn followed Mrs. Miller into the house, she glanced back at Beckett. He was leading both horses toward the barn, but he caught her eye and offered a small wave. She waved back, feeling something flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with nerves about her new job. The room Mrs. Miller showed her was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for her belongings. A window looked out over the corrals, and evening light streamed through the simple curtains. It was more than Katelyn had dared hope for. This is perfect, she said softly. It was my daughter's room, Mrs. Miller said, her voice suddenly quieter. Emma, she would have been about your age now. Fever took her when she was 16. I am so sorry. It has been 6 years, but some losses do not fade. Mrs. Miller straightened her shoulders. Anyway, I like to think she would be happy knowing someone is getting use out of this room. Now, let us get to work. Those cowboys will be here in an hour expecting their supper. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Katelyn helped Mrs. Miller finish preparing a meal of roasted chicken, beans, cornbread, and apple pie. The kitchen was well organized and fully stocked, a cook's dream compared to the lean supplies she had worked with at her aunt's ranch. Mrs. Miller worked with efficient precision, and Katelyn found herself falling into an easy rhythm beside her. When the ranch hands began filing in, Katelyn felt a moment of nervousness. They were a rough-looking bunch, weathered by sun and hard work, but most of them offered polite nods as they took their seats at the long table. Beckett came in with a few others, and he caught her eye with an encouraging smile. The meal was a success. The men ate with the single-minded focus of people who worked hard for their living, and there were multiple requests for seconds. When the apple pie came out, one gray-haired cowboy actually let out a whoop of approval. Miss James made that pie, Mrs. Miller announced, and Katelyn felt her cheeks flush as several appreciative comments came her way. After supper, while Katelyn was elbow-deep in dishwater, Beckett appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Need any help? I think I can manage washing dishes," Katelyn said, but she was smiling. "Fair enough. I just wanted to make sure you were settling in all right. Thanks to you, I have a roof over my head and a job. I would say I am doing better than all right." Beckett leaned against the doorframe, looking more relaxed than he had during their ride. "I am glad it worked out. Mrs. Miller does not usually hire on such short notice, so you must have impressed her. Or you have more influence than you think. Maybe a little of both." He paused, seeming to consider his words. "I know today was hard for you with your aunt and all, but I meant what I said earlier. His decisions are not yours. The sooner you believe that, the sooner you can stop carrying that weight." Katelyn set down the plate she was washing and turned to face him fully. "Why do you care so much? You do not even know me." "I do not know," Beckett admitted. "But when I saw you sitting there outside the stable, looking like the world had ended but still not giving up, I just knew I had to help. Call it instinct or call it foolishness, but I do not regret it." Their eyes met and held, and Katelyn felt that flutter in her stomach again, stronger this time. There was something in the way he looked at her, something that made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in a long time. "Well, I am grateful for your instinct," she said softly. "Or your foolishness, whichever it was." Beckett's smile was warm enough to melt butter. "Get some rest after you finish up here. Tomorrow will be another long day." "I will, and Beckett, thank you for everything." "Anytime, Katelyn." The use of her first name, without the formal miss, sent a little thrill through her. She watched him leave, then turned back to her dishes with a smile she could not quite suppress. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of hard work and small victories. Katelyn rose before dawn each day to help Mrs. Miller prepare breakfast, then spent her mornings cleaning the bunkhouse and doing laundry, and her afternoons helping with supper preparations. The work was exhausting, but it was also satisfying in a way her life in Camp Verde had never been. Here, she was earning her keep through her own labor, not living on charity or bearing the weight of someone else's failures. The ranch hands accepted her presence with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some were gruff but fair, others were friendly and talkative. A few tried flirting, but Mrs. Miller shut that down with a sharp word about respecting young ladies under her roof. Katelyn appreciated the protection, though she was fully capable of handling unwanted advances herself. Beckett was a constant presence, always seeming to be nearby when she needed help carrying something heavy or when one of the other hands got a little too friendly. He never hovered or made her feel incapable, but his presence was a comfort nonetheless. They fell into an easy friendship, stealing conversations during meals or in the evenings when the work was done. She learned that he had started working ranches when he was 14, after his father died. He had worked his way up from stable hand to horse trainer, with a reputation for being able to gentle even the wildest Mustang. He loved the land with a fierce passion, talked about the red rocks and wide skies with the reverence most people reserved for church. He had dreams of one day owning his own small ranch, nothing fancy, just enough land to raise good horses and live free. In turn, Katelyn told him about her childhood, about parents who had loved her fiercely but died too soon, about her years with her aunt and uncle, and the slow decline as her uncle's decisions caught up with him. She even told him about the dreams she had once harbored of opening a restaurant, of cooking food that brought people joy. "Why do you not still want that?" Beckett asked one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I do not know. It seems foolish now, after everything that happened. My aunt would say I am getting above my station." "Your aunt also blamed you for things that were not your fault," Beckett pointed out. "Maybe it is time to stop letting her voice in your head make your decisions." Katelyn considered that, turning it over in her mind like a smooth stone. "Maybe you are right, but dreams require money and opportunity, neither of which I have." "Not yet," Beckett said, "but that does not mean never." At the end of the 2 weeks, Mrs. Miller called Katelyn into the kitchen after breakfast. "Well, Miss James, your trial period is up. I have been watching you closely these past weeks." Katelyn's heart hammered in her chest. She had worked as hard as she could, but maybe it had not been enough. "You are a hard worker, no question about that," Mrs. Miller continued. "But more than that, you have a gift for making people feel cared for. The men have been happier, more settled since you started. That is worth more than just good cooking, though your cooking is excellent." She smiled, the expression softening her usually stern features. "I would like to offer you a permanent position if you are willing. Same terms as before, but I will raise your pay to $12 a month after the first 3 months if you continue at this standard." Relief and joy crashed over Katelyn in equal measure. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Yes, absolutely, I will not let you down." "I know you will not. Now let us get to work on these breakfast dishes." That evening, Katelyn found Beckett in the barn, working with a young horse that was still learning to accept a saddle. She watched for a moment, impressed by his patience and gentle firmness as he worked with the skittish animal. "She made me permanent," Katelyn announced, unable to keep the grin off her face. Beckett looked up, his own face breaking into a wide smile. "I knew she would. Congratulations, Katelyn. I could not have done it without you. If you had not brought me here, I do not know where I would be right now. You would have figured something out. You are stronger than you give yourself credit for." He gave the horse a final pat and walked over to lean against the stall door beside her. "But I am glad I could help." They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, close enough that Katelyn could feel the warmth radiating from him. The barn smelled of hay and leather and horses, scents that were becoming familiar and comforting. "Beckett," she said softly, "why have you never married?" "A good man like you, I would think women would be lining up." He laughed, but there was a hint of self-consciousness in it. "Ranch work does not leave much time for courting, and I suppose I have always figured that when the right woman came along I would know. No sense in settling for less than that. And has she come along, I mean?" Beckett turned to look at her, and there was something intense in his gaze that made her breath catch. "I am starting to think maybe she has." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Katelyn felt her heartbeat quicken, felt the warmth of a blush spreading across her cheeks. She should say something, break the tension, but she did not want to. She wanted to stay suspended in this moment where everything felt right and possible. "Katelyn," Beckett started, but he was interrupted by one of the other ranch hands calling his name from outside the barn. "Beckett, need your help with the fence in the south pasture." The spell broke. Beckett let out a frustrated breath, then called back, "Be right there." He looked at Katelyn apologetically. "I should go, of course. The work never ends on a ranch. Can we talk later? Really talk? I would like that." He touched her hand briefly. A gesture so fleeting it might have been accidental, except for the way his fingers lingered for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. Then he was gone, striding out into the fading daylight, leaving Katelyn with a racing heart and a tangle of emotions she was not quite ready to name. The next few weeks brought a shift in their relationship, subtle but undeniable. Beckett found excuses to be near her, offering to help with tasks that did not really require assistance, lingering over conversations that could have been brief. Katelyn caught herself watching for him, her heart lifting every time she saw his tall figure approaching. Mrs. Miller noticed, of course. Very little escaped her sharp eyes. One afternoon, as they were preparing supper, she said casually, "Beckett is a good man." "Yes, he is," Katelyn agreed, focusing intently on the potatoes she was peeling. "His mother raised him right after his father passed. Taught him to respect women, to work hard, to be honest. Those are rare qualities in any man, but especially out here. He has been very kind to me." "He has been more than kind, dear, and you have been good for him. I have not seen him smile this much in the whole time he has worked here." Mrs. Miller paused in her work to look at Katelyn directly. "I just want you to know that I would not object if you two wanted to step out together. I know some employers forbid that sort of thing, but I believe in letting people find happiness where they can." Katelyn felt her cheeks heat. "I do not know that Beckett thinks of me that way." "Then you are not as observant as I thought." Mrs. Miller's tone was dry but not unkind. "That boy is head over heels. He is just trying to be respectful and not rush you after everything you have been through." The words settled into Katelyn's chest, warm and thrilling. Could it be true? Did Beckett really care for her the way she was beginning to care for him? The possibility made her feel light-headed. That evening, after the supper dishes were done, Katelyn found Beckett on the porch as she had hoped she would. He was sitting on the steps, looking out at the stars just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "I was hoping you would." He scooted over to make room for her on the step. They sat in silence for a while, shoulders almost touching. Katelyn could hear the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of wind through the grass. It was peaceful in a way she had never known her life could be. "You wanted to talk earlier," she said finally. "About something important." "I did. I do." Beckett took a deep breath. Katelyn, these past few weeks getting to know you have been some of the best of my life. You are smart and strong and kind, and you do not let anyone make you feel small. When I am around you, I feel like everything makes sense in a way it did not before. Katelyn's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I feel the same way. You make me feel safe and valued and like I can be myself without pretending or apologizing. I know it has not been long since everything happened with your aunt, and I do not want to rush you or make you feel pressured, but I need you to know how I feel. He turned to face her fully, and even in the dim light she could see the sincerity in his eyes. I am falling in love with you, Katelyn. Actually, I think I have been falling since the moment I saw you outside that stable, refusing to let the world break you. Tears pricked at Katelyn's eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. I am falling in love with you too, Beckett. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was too soon or too complicated, but I cannot help it. You are everything I did not know I was looking for. Can I kiss you? He asked softly. I wish you would. He cupped her face gently in his calloused hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. It was not rushed or demanding, just sweet and genuine, a promise of more to come. When they finally pulled apart, Katelyn was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. So what do we do now? She asked. Now we take it one day at a time. We keep getting to know each other. We see where this goes. Beckett traced her cheekbone with his thumb. I do not have much to offer you right now, but I am saving for that ranch I told you about. And if you would want to be part of that dream, part of my future, then I would be the luckiest man in the territory. I would want that, Katelyn whispered. Very much. They sat together under the stars for hours, talking and stealing kisses, planning a future that suddenly seemed bright and full of possibility. For the first time since her parents died, Katelyn felt like she had found home not in a place, but in a person. The next months passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Katelyn and Beckett became inseparable when they were not working, and even Mrs. Miller's knowing smiles could not embarrass them out of their joy. They took long rides on Sunday afternoons, exploring the countryside and talking about everything and nothing. Beckett taught her to ride better, and she taught him to dance, even though there was no music except what they hummed. In late October, a letter arrived for Katelyn. She recognized her aunt's handwriting and felt her stomach drop. She had not heard from Aunt Margaret since that terrible day in town, and she was not sure she wanted to now. Beckett found her in the kitchen, staring at the unopened envelope. Bad news. I do not know. It is from my aunt. Do you want me to stay while you read it, please? With trembling fingers, Katelyn opened the letter and read the cramped handwriting. As her eyes moved down the page, her expression shifted from apprehension to surprise to something like grief. She is apologizing, Katelyn said slowly. She says she has had time to think, to really look at Thomas's papers and understand everything he did. She admits that she blamed me unfairly, that she was looking for someone to be angry at because she could not be angry at him. She wants to know if I can ever forgive her. That is good, is it not? Beckett asked carefully. It is. But it is also too late for some things. She cannot give me back those months of thinking I destroyed their lives. She cannot erase the things she said. Katelyn folded the letter carefully. I think I can forgive her eventually. But I do not think I can go back to Camp Verde, to that life. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you someone who knows what she wants and is not afraid to choose her own path. Beckett pulled her into his arms. You do not owe anyone your future, Katelyn, not even family. I will write her back. Tell her I forgive her, but that I have a new life here now. Katelyn rested her head against Beckett's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Thank you for always knowing the right thing to say. I just tell you the truth. You are the one brave enough to believe it. In December, Beckett took Katelyn on a special ride up into the red rocks that surrounded the valley. They climbed to a high overlook where they could see for miles in every direction, the winter sun painting everything in shades of gold and amber. "This is my favorite place in the whole world," Beckett said. "I come here when I need to think or when I need to remember why I love this land so much." "It is beautiful," Katelyn breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "Katelyn, I brought you here because I wanted you to see this place, but also because I have something to ask you." Beckett took both her hands in his. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You make me want to be better, to work harder, to build something real and lasting. I have been saving for years, and I finally have enough to make a down payment on a small ranch about 20 miles from here. It has good water, good grazing land, enough room to build a life." Katelyn's heart was racing again, that familiar flutter that came whenever Beckett looked at her with that particular intensity. "I want to build that life with you," he continued. "I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to raise horses and children and grow old watching sunsets from our porch. Katelyn James, will you marry me?" "Yes," Katelyn said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Beckett pulled a simple gold band from his pocket, a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. He slipped it onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, and she was laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed with joy. They were married in early February of 1883, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with Mrs. Miller and the ranch hands as witnesses. Mrs. Miller cried through the whole thing, though she tried to hide it. Katelyn wore a dress that Mrs. Miller had helped her sew, pale blue with white lace at the collar and cuffs. Beckett wore his best suit, his dark hair slicked back, his eyes never leaving his bride's face. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Beckett kissed her with a passion that made several of the ranch hands whistle and hoot. Katelyn did not care. She was married to the man she loved, the man who had seen her at her lowest and helped her find her strength again. They spent their wedding night in the small cabin on their new property, a modest structure that needed work but had good bones. Beckett carried her over the threshold, and they both laughed at the romantic gesture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Raines," he said, setting her down gently. "Mrs. Raines," Katelyn repeated, testing out the sound of it. "I like it." "I love you," Beckett said, pulling her close. "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with a dream." "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible," Katelyn whispered. "Thank you for telling me that his decisions were not mine. You saved me, Beckett." "We saved each other," he corrected. "Now let us build something beautiful together." The first year of marriage was harder than Katelyn had anticipated, but also more rewarding. The ranch required constant work, from dawn until long after dark. They spent their days repairing fences, tending to the small herd of cattle Beckett had bought, and working with the horses he was breeding and training. Money was tight, and there were moments when Katelyn wondered if they had taken on too much. But then Beckett would pull her into his arms at the end of a long day, or she would wake up to find him watching her with such love in his eyes that she could barely breathe, and she knew they had made the right choice. They were building something together, something that belonged only to them. In the spring, Katelyn discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had seen women die in childbirth, had watched her own mother struggle with each pregnancy. But Beckett's excitement was infectious, and Mrs. Miller, who visited regularly, assured her that she would help when the time came. "You are strong," Mrs. Miller told her. "Stronger than you know. You will do just fine." Their son was born in December of 1883, a squalling bundle of rage and appetite whom they named Benjamin Thomas Raines. Beckett cried when he held his son for the first time, great heaving sobs that he tried to muffle against Catelyn's shoulder. "We made him," he kept saying. "We made this perfect little person." "We did," Catelyn agreed, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "We really did." Benjamin was a demanding baby, but he was also healthy and strong. As he grew, he showed signs of having his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. Beckett was a devoted father, always eager to hold his son or tell him stories about the ranch. In the spring of 1885, Catelyn gave birth to their daughter, Clara Marie. This birth was easier than the first, and Clara was a calmer baby than her brother had been. Beckett doted on his little girl, carrying her around the ranch and showing her the horses before she could even walk. The ranch was thriving now. Beckett's reputation as a horse trainer had spread, and people came from all over the territory to buy his horses or have him train theirs. Catelyn had started selling her baked goods in town, and the extra income helped them expand their operations. They were not rich by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. One afternoon in the summer of 1886, a woman rode up to the ranch. Catelyn was hanging laundry when she recognized her Aunt Margaret, older and grayer but still unmistakably herself. "Aunt Margaret," Catelyn said, surprise making her voice sharp. "What are you doing here? I came to see you if you will have me." Her aunt dismounted slowly, moving like someone whose body ached. "I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I wanted to meet your family. I wanted to see that you are all right." Catelyn was quiet for a long moment, emotions warring in her chest. Part of her wanted to turn her aunt away, to make her feel the rejection that Catelyn had felt. But another part, the part that had grown and healed over the past 4 years, recognized a woman who was trying to make amends. "Come inside," Catelyn said finally. "I will make tea." Over tea and cookies, Aunt Margaret met Benjamin and Clara, who were both shy around the stranger. She admired the ranch and told Catelyn how proud she was of what Catelyn and Beckett had built. She apologized again for her harsh words, explained that she had sold the old ranch and moved into a small house in town, where she worked as a seamstress. "I think about Thomas every day," Margaret said quietly. "And I have had to accept that he made his own choices, just as that cowboy told you. I wasted so much time being angry at the wrong person. I do not expect you to forgive me completely, but I hope we can at least be civil. You are the only family I have left." Catelyn looked at her aunt's weathered face, saw the genuine remorse there. "I have forgiven you, Aunt Margaret. It took time, but I understand now that grief makes us say and do things we do not mean. You can visit when you like." "The children should know their great aunt." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Catelyn. You are kinder than I deserve." When Beckett came in from the fields and found Catelyn having tea with her aunt, he was wary at first, but Catelyn gave him a reassuring smile and he relaxed. By the time Margaret left that evening, there was a tentative peace between them all. "Are you all right?" Beckett asked that night as they lay in bed, the children finally asleep in the next room. "I am. It was hard seeing her, but also good. I needed that closure, I think. I needed to know that I could face her and not fall apart." "You are the strongest person I know," Beckett said, pulling her close. "You always have been. I learned it from you. You showed me that I did not have to carry other people's mistakes. You gave me permission to build my own life." "We built it together," Beckett reminded her. "Everything good in my life came from the day I saw you sitting outside that stable and knew I had to help you." "His decisions are not yours," Catelyn quoted softly. "Those were the words that changed my life. Those were the words that set me free. And I meant every one of them." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they did every night, comfortable in the life they had created through hard work and love. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and joys. There were droughts that tested their resolve and winters that seemed endless. There were losses to Benjamin's first horse, a beloved dog, friends who moved away or passed on. But through it all, Katelyn and Beckett faced everything together, their love growing deeper with each passing year. In 1889, their third child was born, another son they named Daniel. By then, Benjamin was old enough to help around the ranch, taking after his father with the horses. Clara was more interested in cooking and helped her mother in the kitchen, showing the same natural talent Katelyn had inherited from her own mother. Mrs. Miller remained a constant presence in their lives until she passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1890. Katelyn mourned her like the mother she had lost, grateful for the woman who had given her a chance and taught her so much about strength and resilience. Aunt Margaret became a regular visitor, coming once a month to see the children and help with sewing projects. The relationship was never as close as it might have been if those harsh words had never been spoken, but it was honest and respectful, and that was enough. On a warm evening in June of 1892, Katelyn and Beckett sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Benjamin was in the corral working with a young horse. Clara was inside putting Daniel to bed, and the world felt perfectly balanced. "Can you believe it has been 10 years since we met?" Katelyn asked, lacing her fingers through Beckett's. 10 years since I saw a woman who refused to let the world break her," Beckett said. "Best decision I ever made, approaching you that day." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had just ridden past, if you had not stopped?" "Never. Because I do not believe in that kind of coincidence. I think we were supposed to meet that day. I think everything that happened to both of us was leading us to that moment." Katelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think my uncle's death and my aunt's rejection were the worst things that ever happened to me. But without them, I would never have been sitting outside that stable. I would never have met you. I would never have this life." "His decisions were not yours," Beckett said quietly. "But what you built after, what we built together, that is ours. That is our choice, our life, our legacy. I love you, Beckett Raines. More today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow. I love you too, Katelyn Raines." More than words can say. They sat together as the stars began to appear, as they had on so many evenings before, and would on so many evenings to come. Benjamin finished with the horse and came to sit on the steps, dusty and tired but happy. Clara emerged with Daniel in her arms, the little boy sleepy but fighting it. The family was together, whole and happy and thriving. Years later, when their grandchildren asked Katelyn to tell the story of how she and Beckett met, she would always start with the truth. She would tell them about loss and blame, about hitting rock bottom and thinking there was no way up. But then she would tell them about a cowboy with kind eyes who had told her something she desperately needed to hear, that another person's decisions were not hers to carry. She would tell them about building a life from nothing, about turning pain into purpose and grief into growth. She would tell them about love that grew from friendship and respect, about a partnership built on mutual support and shared dreams. And she would tell them that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best moments, if we are brave enough to walk through them. Beckett and Katelyn grew old together on that ranch, watching their children grow and have children of their own. They faced every challenge hand in hand, never forgetting that they had found each other in the darkest of times and had chosen to build something beautiful together. When Katelyn was 73 and Beckett was 76, they still sat on that porch every evening, watching the sunset over the land they loved. Their hands were weathered and spotted with age, but they still fit together perfectly. Their hair was white, but their eyes still sparkled when they looked at each other. "You have any regrets?" Katelyn asked one evening, a question she had never asked in all their years together. Beckett thought about it for a long moment. Only one. I wish I had kissed you sooner. Everything else has been exactly as it should be. Katelyn laughed, the sound as bright and joyful as it had been when she was 22. Then we have lived a very good life indeed. The best life, Beckett agreed, because we lived it together. And as the sun set on another day, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant colors, Katelyn and Beckett sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had raised, and the love that had sustained them through everything. They had started with nothing but each other, and a determination to build something real. They had created a legacy that would outlast them, written in the faces of their children and grandchildren, in the land they had tended, in the love that had never wavered. It had all started with a cowboy who had seen a woman in need and had offered her not pity, but truth. His decisions are not yours. 4 simple words that had changed everything, that had given Katelyn permission to stop carrying guilt that was never hers, and to start building a future that was entirely her own. And what a future it had been.